Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the BCO webinar featuring the Bicester Eco Business Centre. I'm Matt Heeman, a partner at Hawley, and I'm the regional chair of the BCO. So in terms of the running order and timings today, I will do this very short introduction before handing over to Lee Fordham and Lucy Wendon. We are planning on around about 30 minutes of presentation, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions. So if you can please use the chat or the question and answer forums for your questions, and I will put them to the panel. And if you could keep your mics off, that would be appreciated. Okay, so in terms of the panel today, Lucy is the community manager at the Perch Eco Business Centre in Elmsbrook, Northwest Bicester. Lucy works for Town Square, who were appointed by Chilwell District Council to operate the Eco Business Centre. Lucy will be talking about the experience of those that work in and sort of visit the building, more that aspect of the development in the building. And Lee is an associate director at Archetype Limited and has been with the company for 14 years. He has worked on numerous ecological and low energy projects. Taking his experience in designing the UK's first passive house schools in Wolverhampton, he led the design for the Bicester Eco Centre. Okay, but we have lots of buildings that we could talk about. Why are we presenting the Eco Business Centre to you today? Well, for me, it covers two key topics that I'm focusing on for good workplace design: low or zero carbon emissions and well-being. I won't take too much away from what Lucy and Lee are going to say, but it is the first non-domestic building in the UK to achieve Passivhaus Plus. It is also a great place to work. Amongst many other things, it is pet friendly and has bottomless coffee. So what's not to like? Okay, that's enough from me. So Lee will present first and he'll take us through how the design brief was developed into what has been constructed. Lee, over to you.
Thank you, Matthew, much appreciated. Yeah. So yeah, my name's Lee Fordham. Just like to say thank you to Matthew, Bryony, Tasha, and also Lucy, the client, for making time to do this presentation. So thank you all. So this is about Bicester Eco Centre. Bicester, for those of you who don't know, is just on the outskirts of Oxford, just on the other side, the M40. And in 2009, just to give you a background story, it was recognised as one of 4 centres for eco towns throughout the UK. But in 2011, only Bicester remained one of those eco towns. So just to give you an idea of where we are, Bicester town centre is marked on the map here. You can see in red is the Northwest Bicester development, and the blue section is the exemplar section. So you can see the Eco Business Centre and its location in relation to the Bicester town centre. And just zooming in on that blue section we've just showed on the plan there, you can see that effectively our development is surrounded by a small strip of housing, and this was the first section of housing to be developed. The site there is located in red, and we form one corner of the sort of village heart, if you like. The rest of the corners haven't been developed yet. The only building in the development at the moment is this building here. If you can see my arrow, which is just south to the red at our site, and that is the district heating system that supplies all these buildings in this area. And then there's also a school at the end of the drive as well. The rest of the eco centre or exemplary site is up towards the north here. So just a rough idea, but you can see we're effectively a south-facing site. So in terms of the brief, we had requirements in the brief that were BREEAM Excellent, flagship project, had to be zero carbon in use because of the requirement for the Bicester Eco Town, natural materials, and we'll come on to the well-being as well on that, co-working, and also employment space for 125 people. When we first come on the project, Passivhaus and indeed Passivhaus Plus weren't part of the brief, and we drove that through as we developed the building. So you can see here, this slide shows effectively what we were given as we came in as architects on the site. Effectively, this red sort of backward L shape, a J shape here was the sort of project we were given. And this is how it sort of developed in the master plan. What we found is that actually it was still 125 people, about 1,250 square meters of floor area, but using 3 staircases, we felt that was quite inefficient. So what we did is we managed to get the same amount of space for 125 people, but in a vast reduced floor area. And the result of that allowed us then to spend more money on the fabric. So by doing that, we could form effectively what we do at Archetype is fabric first approach. We make sure that the building works well at the start, high levels of insulation, high levels of airtightness. We do PHPP, Passive House Planning Package, in all of our buildings, or most of our buildings. And we found at the start that we could actually get this to be Passive House. So we convinced the client about Passive House, and they said, yep, that's fine. You can do Passive House. So we managed to convince them, along with the contractor Kia, and we started developing this as a Passive House building. There were, however, planning restrictions we had to look at in terms of the master planning. One of those was we had to keep a portico on the outside of the building. We had to have the corner of this centralized plot as a high use corner in terms of aesthetic purposes. And there was a restriction on height, not only of the height of the building, but also of how high this portico was and how it related to the neighboring buildings. The other thing we had to bear in mind was the amount of PVs on the building, because this had to be zero carbon. When we first started looking at the building, the amount of PVs required of this building when it wasn't Passive House was huge. We would have never fitted it on the site. So what we started to look at when it was Passive House is how we could get all these PVs required to get this zero carbon on the site. And this is what then started driving us down the Passive House Plus route, because we realized if we could get it to Passive House Plus, we could actually get all the PVs on the roof of the building. And that was one of the only ways we could actually get all the PVs we needed on this site, because it's quite a tight site. And by doing that, what we did is effectively brought the roof out over the top of the insulation zone, if you like, and we ended up with these lovely balconies here that you can see on the photos later, and also an external staircase, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So one of the main ideas about the building, we've done some incubator hubs before, and the one thing that really helps young, vibrant practices grow is this ability to bump into people, these incidental meetings where these small communities can start growing. So the one thing we wanted to do was to have a very visual connection between every space. So these people can see each other, look at each other, know what they're doing, etc. But the other thing we found was, going back to these 3 staircases, if we could just get one staircase in this building and put the other one for fire escape outside, it means everyone's got to use one staircase. And again, it's another way of funneling people into these staircases. And again, these incidental meetings occur. So that was one of the drivers. And again, obviously it saved us floor area as well. One of the main things about, not just about Passive House, but about buildings in general, as we're going into global warming crisis, and everyone's saying, you know, they're announcing zero carbon and things like that, is obviously how we get over solar gains. So one thing we have got around this building is effectively a continual timber brise-soleil that runs around the building. Now, in most of the situation, those timber brise-soleils are vertical, but on the south side, we've also got horizontal brise-soleils to stop the sun coming in from the south as well. But that also gives us the ability to walk through between the timber frame and the building and clean windows, etc. So that forms two uses. But you can see here very early sketches, you know, how we're trying to tie in with buildings and etc. etc. And in the plan, how it sits on the plan, you can see we're not far off of south's direct up the page, And what we've done is created this very tight, effectively sort of donut shape, square donut shape, if you like, with all the squares in the middle being the hub space in the centre of the building, and then the car parking at the back. The car parking is set really low numbers, and there's a bus stop right outside. And the idea of the Eco Centre is not just about the building performing, but about the community performing. So there's bus stop right outside, limited parking spaces, etc. And on this side of the drawing, it just shows you some of the things we've got here in terms of what the GIFA was, what the construction cost was, cost per metre squared. We've got BREEAM outstanding, and obviously Passivhaus Plus. So just looking at the plans, this is the ground floor plan, and you can see here, this is the bottom of the hub space, the central space, which goes over the full height of the building. And then we've got various sizes offices as you go through the building. So we've got big flexible office spaces for people to use. We've got medium and small size office spaces, whether you're an office on your own or whether you're an office with 10, 15 people, there's various spaces for you to use. Each floor has a meeting room, and the ground floor has a kitchen. Again, one kitchen, so that everyone has these incidental meetings as well. And then you can see the internal staircase here. It also forms part of this stacked accommodation where you've got toilets, showers, lift, plant rooms, etc. And then on the first floor, again, these various size office spaces. Again, they're sporadically placed around the building. So again, you get these various size offices intermingled. And then each floor, again, like I say, has these meeting rooms. There are kitchenette spaces on each floor. As Matthew says, there's a huge amount of coffee drunk in this building, which I think Lucy can verify. But each floor has its own little kitchenette as well. But the main kitchen's on the ground floor. And then you can see on here when we start looking at these external spaces as well. And as these grow, as you get higher in the building, these external spaces get bigger and they get better views over the countryside as well. So on the top floor, again, we've got a meeting room and various size office spaces. And you can see this end of the building just stacks very nicely as it goes up the building. So very simple design, really. And then in terms of the section, again, all what I was talking about earlier in terms of all these rooms have views into this central hub space, views across the hub space. You can see the lights in the back here. And then again, how we've got natural light into the center of the building. All the access points for these windows that do open, these roof lights that do open, are off the main walkways to the side. So there's no reason to build big scaffold towers or anything like that. We need to maintain things. And these were just some early sketches of what that central hub space could look like. And you'll see some photos of it later. And then again, just some very quick brief elevations early on for planning, but you can see down the bottom here how we've kept in line with the height of the existing building, so planning requirement, and also the height of this area here in terms of the portico as you walk between these lightweight steel columns between the buildings. So you can see the sort of portico design here. In terms of the building itself, we obviously wanted to keep it quite simple, but we also wanted to keep it well ventilated. So we've got MVHR, mechanical vent heat recovery, but we all know global warming's a thing. So what we like to do is get some natural ventilation in there as well for night vents if we need it in the future for purging the building. But what we're trying to do is this elongation of this building. So what we've got is some windows here that don't open, but behind the louvers, you've got the structure and the louvers themselves are open. So these open this way and these ones open this way. But what we've tried to do is get loads of wall in. It's wall where we get high U value. So the more wall we've got, the better. But you just don't notice that. So rather than cutting a hole in the wall, we've got this aesthetic reading of this linear thing going on. And this just shows how the building's built. So from a thermal mass point of view, it's a concrete frame building effectively. But it has got timber infill. With archetypes specialise in timber frame, but in this case we needed some thermal mass. But it just shows you again how this layer of insulation wraps around this concrete to keep the concrete nice and warm. And then the air tightness layer is on the inside, and we're talking about air tightness about 20 times better than standard U values here, or standard building regs. Just some very brief details of how we wrap. Again, this whole building sat effectively on a bit of polystyrene, if you like. And what we do is we put the insulation down, we put a raft on it. So the building's sitting on a raft, then we would build straight off that. So it's all really simple. It's built from one level, very simple way of constructing. And you can see here, you got the concrete slab with the insulation under here. And then this is just showing you how, the contractor, basically any hole there was in this OSB, they went along and taped up to show that's how engrossed they got in this airtightness requirement for passive house. A bit over the top, you don't need to do that, but we've never seen it done before like that, so it's quite funny. And then in terms of designers, how far we have to go. So these are just the connection pieces for the steel frame that hold the brise-soleil up. And we have to model all these intricate details to make sure there's no thermal bridges, no cold spots in the building, and make sure it's really nice and comfortable for Lucy and her occupants to live in or to work in. So that just shows the sort of thing we look at there. And then in terms of TM54, we usually do TM54 analysis rather than just part L. These are just the inputs, so it gives you an idea of U values, etc. But the inputs of TM54 are quite important because part L, which is the building regulations, don't use regulated and unregulated energy, whereas a TM54 uses both. And the nice thing about that is we don't end up with a performance gap. So about 40 to 50% of the buildings in the UK at the moment don't perform as predicted. There's a huge performance gap in what we as designers think we're giving a client and what the client actually ends up with. So the nice thing about TM54, it does give us a slightly more accurate result of how much this building's actually going to be using, because it uses all the unregulated energy as well. So this gives you an idea of zero carbon definition. This was the one for the Eco Centre. So over the course of a year, the net carbon dioxide emissions from all energy use within the buildings on the eco development as a whole are 0 or below. Whereas the passive house definition, you notice, is pretty much the same. But the nice thing about a passive house definition, it does talk about comfort first. So the comfort of the occupants are one of the most important things. And Matthew was talking about well-being of the occupants. And the one thing we do is make sure that the materials we use in the building are natural. So for instance, the paints in this building are natural, the stains that are used on the timber are all natural stains. And we try and use as many natural products as we possibly can within the building. And that results in it being more healthy. And obviously we've got MVHR. So that again is replacing air all the time with fresh filtered air all the time, preheated, but it's still fresh. So if we've got really good products, really natural products, really healthy products, and we're replacing the air as well, it makes the environment more healthy for people as well. And we do monitor certain buildings, we do with not just temperature, relative humidity, but also particulate matter and VOC, so how cancerous the building is. So this just gives you an idea of the amount of PVs required for a building of this site when we did some analysis of it. So you can see here, you know, a standard building reg buildings, you know, between 542 and 430, that's how many PVs you would need. When we start getting down to passive house, we start reducing a lot more. And then when we got down to Passivhaus Plus, that was the reason for getting to Passivhaus Plus, was we could fit all these PVs. We only needed 143 PVs and we could fit them on the building. You can imagine if we'd have designed this building, a standard building, if you like, you'd be talking, you know, a field of PVs just to make this building zero carbon. So that was one of the advantages of Passivhaus Plus. And again, just talking about, you know, then how we have to look at every single element of the building. So we looked at the photocopiers, we looked at the hand dryers, we looked at everything electrical that went in this building, how we control them, for these Zippo light, you know, to make it hot water all the time. They're on timer devices, so they're not on all the time. So it's all these things we've looked into to make sure this building's as efficient as we can get it. And this is just in PHPP, you basically, everyone who knows PHPP, Passive House Planning Package, you're obsessed by this little green cross and this graph. And every time you put a bit of data in, the little cross moves. So this just shows you very quickly where we were. So we were quite confident in March. We thought, yeah, we can definitely persuade the client to go plus. And we were still confident in April. And all of a sudden then it dropped off, because then we didn't know we were going to have PVs and things like that. So then we went back up again, and it just got more and more throughout the process. This following this cross around became more and more nerve-wracking. But eventually we did manage to get in, and we managed to get it Passivhaus Plus. This just shows some of the building as it went up, right from effectively day one to it pretty much finishing at the end. And that it took about a year, just over a year, to get it finished, a year and a month or so to get it finished. So that's it from a design point of view, and how we sort of influenced the brief, and how we answered the brief from the start. But again, I'm just going to hand over to Lucy, because Lucy's actually using the building now. So it'd be good to hear Lucy's thoughts on that.
Oh, well, thank you, Lee, and thank you for having us, BCO and Matt. It's much appreciated. It's nice to be here, and lovely to see so many people. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and the company I work for, and Lee's going to kind of go through the slides. But yeah, let's get back to the building as quick as we can. But my name's Lucy. I'm the community manager of the Perch Eco Business Centre in Elmsbrook, which is the first and only eco village that was built by the government, commissioned about, kind of, as Lee was saying, about kind of more than 10 years ago now. But yeah, so and the Perch Eco Business Centre is powered by Town Square Spaces, who are a B Corp. They're the company I work for. We try and balance profit and purpose, and we use our business as a force for good wherever we can. So whether it's environmental or social, but our social purpose is actually to help people start and grow their business. So we do this in lots of different ways. But we, on a very basic level, we kind of run upskilling workshops for people, and we try and make them as accessible and inclusive as possible. So whether it's a kind of an evening, our startup club in the evening, so people who still have a job, who want to start a business, they've got a business idea, they're not quite sure where to go. We do 8-week courses in the evening for people. We also do lunchtime sessions, and we also do accelerated growth programs and things like that. So whether they've got a business idea, they're not sure what to do, whether it's going to work, or whether they've got a kind of tech startup and they know it's going to work, and they're on a kind of trajectory to go international, we kind of try and help people where we can. But another way we kind of help people start their businesses and grow their businesses is by kind of creating these communities in these very unique spaces. We've got spaces all over the country now, coming up to 6 spaces now, which is great, in Wales and in England. But we know how disconnected and how lonely people can feel when they start their kind of journey as an entrepreneur, starting up their own business. So we want to help people connect. And this building lent itself so much to kind of our beliefs, that kind of had so many synergies around community and well-being. So yeah, I kind of want to start with a couple of quotes. I'm always going around asking people how they're doing, giving me feedback if they're happy, and a couple of nice quotes for you. Claire Nash. Nash's architect, she's an eco architect, so she absolutely loves this building, and she told me the other day that she just loves being here, breathing in the fresh but warm air that you get from the natural ventilation system of the passive house. One of my co-workers was saying it's a very inspirational building. You can kind of see it from whatever angle you look at it, right? Passive house buildings, incredible natural light, natural ventilation system. It all just kind of ticks all those boxes. And as Lee was saying, the building has so many elements to it, the healthy buildings. I mean, Lee and I talk about this at length, but there's been so many studies to show that healthy buildings just increase productivity by so much. So you tend to find that schools are often, or certainly moving towards a lot of schools becoming passive house, which I think Lee's worked on a few of those. And it's because the kids aren't having that after lunch slump. And it has nothing to do with what they have for lunch. It's that lack of natural light. It's kind of breathing in those volatile chemicals from the kind of paint fumes and varnish fumes, which hang around for so long. So this building's epic, and I absolutely love working here. we try and create a very diverse, as I said, very diverse, very inclusive community where people can meet. And it's not just about your kind of accountants and your lawyers, although we need them. It's also about our kind of therapists. It's about our yoga teacher who comes in and kind of does a class every week. We're, as Lee was saying, we don't have a huge, we also do a pop-up cafe. Great timing, Lee. But look at that amazing light. But yeah, so Elmsbrook is not big enough yet, hasn't got enough homes to have a cafe, a shop. So we make sure we provide that. So we do a pop-up cafe with banging cakes on Friday. We kind of, as I said, had the yoga class, the Pilates classes going on. We've got kind of, you know, it's all going on. I do an honesty bar, or I do a kind of cocktail bar because I used to be a mixologist back in the day. So anything that kind of gets people meeting, connecting. In the last year and a half, it's been a wild ride since we've been open. You can imagine we were just starting to gain momentum, and then kind of lockdown happened in March, and we kind of had to almost start from scratch a few months later when kind of Boris said, don't go to work, but do go to work. But if you can't stay at home, do. So we essentially opened back up for our members and the co-workers, and obviously very safely and COVID secure, we reopened. And I've been kind of managing that day to day. But, you know, just people being, you know, having space. And, you know, it's very presumptuous to think that people have physical space at home, to have the Wi-Fi capacity at home, you know. A lot of people don't have that. I heard some horror stories in lockdown about people living in kind of cupboards for Zoom calls because they shared the house with so many people that they had to do all their work in their bedrooms. But anyway, another time. But yeah, so we've got showers. We desperately try and encourage people to travel sustainably. And I tell you what, the people who cycle, like me, who cycle from Oxford, people cycle from Woodstock. And I mean, I do talk to people sometimes. I'm like, you know, you could work from this space, which is closer. And their kind of answer is always the same. The building's so bloody amazing that they would rather cycle 10 minutes, 15 minutes down the road than kind of go to a local kind of dark co-working space, which maybe doesn't quite do that kind of job that we do. So that's amazing. This is the co-working space downstairs. It's a lot more kind of populated with furniture and things now, but this was kind of the start. As a small company, we didn't have a huge amount of budget to kind of populate it with furniture straight away. But as we got members, we were able to get, you know, nice meeting room chairs and kind of more desks and things like that. So yeah, so it's been a brilliant ride. And yeah, we're all about kind of making sure that our members work hard, but kind of have that well-being side, because I'm sure any of you who have your own business know that you could work day 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. and never really be done. So do it in a nice surrounding, and I hope that's what we provide. So yeah, just very grateful to Lee for creating this incredible building that we could come and work from, really. But I think that's all from me. I mean, yeah, as Matt said, we offer bottomless coffee, we're dog friendly and stuff like that. It's all just the things that help people out. Quite a few of I've got a big Hungarian Vizsla, total lockdown dog. She comes in pretty much every day with me, and you know, the members come down and have a sit down with her and genuinely just stroke her and be like, I just need 10 minutes of dog therapy. It's awesome. It's everything I kind of dreamed of when I kind of started this job. So yeah, it's been a big steep learning curve. I've spent 20 years in restaurants. But yeah, if I'm sure I've missed some really salient points. So if anybody has any questions for me and things like that, then please do shout. And I'm sure Lee's got some time for questions as well. But yeah, like, just thanks for having us, Matt. It's been awesome.
No problem. Well, thanks. Thank you very much, both of you. That was really, really interesting. Okay, I have got a number of questions, some we had before and some that we've got from Jack. So what I'm going to do is just try and sort of mingle in a number of those. First question, I think really for you, Lucy, in terms of, are you measuring wellness? Are you, you know, there are sort of measures that are in place these days to look at how people are being positively or negatively impacted by their environment. Are you doing that at the moment?
Well, that's a really good question. It's something that Lee and I've talked about, kind of you know, making sure the building is doing what we hope it's doing. So we're working on that, aren't we, Lee? But in regards to wellness, I just keep a real, I mean, I'm not a micromanager, but I like to check in with my community. I like to kind of sit down with a cup of tea for kind of 5 minutes here and there and just check everyone's doing well, and kind of find out what we can do better. I think that's a really good thing. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Trying to balance, like trying to measure wellness. Because there's so many different factors to it. But yeah, I try my hardest to kind of, we do surveys quite a lot, and just make sure that we're kind of keeping on top of, you know, if a member's not coming in as much as they used to, or if a member kind of comes in and doesn't see themselves, I'll always, without being intrusive, I'll always try and kind of make sure that they're kind of doing okay. And yeah, so I think just a balance of kind of keeping on top of kind of how people are doing, kind of via surveys, via kind of sit down chats, just maybe more organic meetings, seems to have worked quite well up till now. And we get a lot of members who refer and get friends and things to come and work here as well. So I think it must be working. Okay, sure. Okay, thank you. I think another sort of question was, it's about post-occupancy evaluation. Have you done anything on that? Post-occupancy evaluation, so how things are holding up in terms of, you know, people coming in and the I mean, I can't, so we literally closed in March for a month and a half, 2 months, because nobody knew what was going on when lockdown happened. And we as Town Square Spaces put aside a whole year for research and development. We kind of wrote a paper called What If Everyone Could Walk to Work, and essentially just explored what the future of work might look like. And we then created this very cool thing called Boot the Commute, which is all about kind of finding out people's actual feelings about their commute, you know, before lockdown, and then kind of what they wanted in the future and what benefits people are taken away from lockdown, because obviously it impacted a lot of people very differently. And I feel like there's a lot of polarization between the businesses who just went whoosh and just started, grew during lockdown, and the businesses that just died for one reason or another. So we kind of put a year aside thinking like, right, this is it, no one's going to be in the buildings. Actually, what I found is that now up to this point, don't get me wrong, it's mainly been office members, people who can kind of be in a space, a very controlled space on their own. We've had a few co-workers here and there, but of course we couldn't really take many co-workers because we have to make sure everyone's socially distanced, they're safe, they're kind of, you know, in the right space. But I have seen inquiries just go through, like, I've never seen so many inquiries about co-working. But hopefully it helps that we've kind of reduced our, we decided to, rather than put up our prices because we lost some space, we decided to bring them down because we knew that we wanted to make it as inclusive as possible. So you can work from this space Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 for £99. That's fantastic. Okay, well, great. Yeah. It sounds like it's very positive then. Okay, so I had a couple of questions for Lee, really, and it's sort of 2 or 3 questions coming together really about sort of the working environment that you've got and how that plays out in terms of COVID working. Was that, you know, I guess your design was fixed before you had a chance to think about that, Lee, and how does the building react to that?
Yeah, the building was obviously actually finished before the COVID pandemic. So obviously with hindsight, you know, we might have done things different. But in terms of Passivhaus, it is mechanically ventilated, heat recovery, so all the air is filtered, and we can, if we needed to, put different filters in for different sites, particulate matter. Sure. So that can be done if required. Obviously, you could turn the MVHR off if you wanted to. All the windows open, it's naturally ventilated, just turn it into a standard building. But what we're finding is actually the MVHR seems to be doing its job. We've monitored. Not getting back onto your POE and measuring wellness. We're not actually measuring this building in particular. We are trying to, but at the moment we're not. We do measure all our other buildings, or most of our other buildings. And we do find that things like, you know, the natural materials, like I say, we do measure particulate matter and VOCs, and we know from that, along with an MVHR system, that the internal environment is a lot healthier. So we do monitor things like that in our other buildings. So yes, we can do that. And I think the only other thing that's being POE at the moment is obviously Lucy's sending us all the data in terms of monthly costs and things like that, running costs of the building. At the moment, I think the average running cost is about £100 a month or £60 a month or something like that, Lucy?
About £50 a month, yeah. Even in the
£50 a month. So you know, it's definitely working well. So from PO point of view, that's what we're doing.
Okay. Couple of other questions then. What was the final air tightness that was achieved? What did you get it down to?
This one only just passed. It's just in that information now. I think it was 0.59 from memory. So
right.
It just let me just check because it is in here somewhere. Yeah, 0.59 it
Okay.
got. So you're allowed 0.649 or below. So yeah, they just scraped through it. We tell everyone it's 0.6 or below, so they just got in that. But actually, there's a bit more leeway than that. But yes, so still a very good air test.
Yeah, sure. Another couple of questions whilst we've still got another 5 minutes or so. How does high levels of insulation used, or how does the high levels of insulation used affect the embodied carbon? Obviously, from an operational energy perspective, that's very, very low or zero. How about the embodied carbon? How was that considered during design, and beyond?
Yeah, well, embodied carbon wasn't part of the brief, but we do, from our point of view in Archetype, we do obviously look at body carbon anyway as a sustainable architectural practice. The insulation we've used here is in the walls is warm cell, which is recycled newspaper. So in terms of body carbon, that's extremely good. It's better than a lot of products that are used within external walls. So in terms of the body carbon within the building, obviously it's timber frame. There are concrete frame elements as well, but in general, most of that building is a timber frame building, with the timber infill. And then the triple glazed windows are timber windows with aluminium on the outside as well. So they're not full aluminium windows, they're composite. And then all the internal fabric, so the green fabric you saw on that image in terms of the internal shots, that's made from nettle, for instance. So we try and use as much natural products as we can, so the embodied carbon is as low as we can get it. Admittedly, on this building, it is a concrete frame, so that obviously the embodied carbon's gone up a bit, but we do use quite low GBMS or high GBMS content in the concrete also. So
yeah, I think the operational energy piece is quite well understood now, but I think the great leap forward is going to be when we understand how we get to zero embodied carbon and we start to get a few of those constructed, because we've really got to close that gap as well. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and also, what we only do is sequestered carbon, and what we do when the body's demolished at the end of the day, it's all well and good having embodied carbon now, but if you can't recycle it or reuse it or do anything with it at the end of life, then we need to consider things like that as well.
Sure, that's certainly on the way. How is the purge ventilation achieved in the building? How do you achieve that?
Yeah, so the MVHR system was obviously running 24 hours a day. That has a boost function on it, so it can be boosted. And then in the summer months, that's an MVR, so it's mechanical ventilate heat recovery. But in the summer, we put it on summer bypass mode. So basically, it's not recovering heat. It's just providing air from outside, filtered air from outside. It's not recovering heat. But also what we do is those grills on the outside of the building where the windows are behind are open, those grills are secure grills. So the idea is that those windows can open, the building's still secure, but we get a full purge through the building. And the nice thing about that is the ventilation it can either be used for the MVHR unit, or we can actually purge it so the roof lights open and the building completely purges itself as well. So there's two ways of doing it, but usually what happens is the MVHR does most of it, and then we just put it on summer bypass mode. But if the building ever was to get really hot, then we can just open it up and purge it as well.
Okay.
At night,
yeah, thanks. Yeah, that security aspect's important, isn't it? One final question, one for you, I think, Lucy. Any problems with getting insurance?
Because of what?
Well, I don't know. Liz Bailey's asked this
Come on,
question.
Liz. Can you unmute yourself?
I don't know if that works, but is it because of the? I don't know what Liz is.
So I'll tell you what I know. And bear in mind, I'm sure there are, Liz, if you want to kind of, I'll put my email into the box, the chat box, and if you want to kind of get in touch for more details. But in regards to our members, we ask each individual member or office to have their own kind of business, like their own insurance for contents. And then we have our own kind of contents insurance as Town Square. But I don't know, would there be any other insurance we're thinking of?
I'm not sure there's anything particularly novel in there. You haven't got, you haven't got a timber frame. You haven't got. I don't quite know.
Yeah.
The timber frame. Sorry, Lucy, go for it.
Go for it. No, I was just going to say we've got kind of several layers of security as you kind of come in, so it'd be it'd be pretty hard to rob the place. But I suppose you could. I don't want to jinx it.
In terms of construction, the timber frame was obviously insured by the contractor, and they had, because it was not a timber frame but it had a lot of timber in it, they had to adhere to the requirements for building effectively a timber frame on site. So there's HSE guidance, 16 steps to do that in terms of how you bring stuff on, how you protect it, etc., etc. Once the building's up and running like it is now for Lucy, the timber frame's protected. So the timber frame is actually protected from the inside in terms of plasterboard, which gives you fire rating. And on the outside, there's a fire wrap that goes on the outside of the building as well, and that's protected. And the cavities are fully protected as well. So if the cavity ever got, ever got a fire in it, there's cavity barriers in there that stop it, if that's what you mean. Okay. I think we've probably covered from a use and a construction and everything point of view there. But
Lee, it's like we've done this before.
So I don't think, I think it's okay. Okay, right. Well, I think we have to draw stumps there, as we're only. Thank you, Jack. I've had a thank you and a couple of messages about what a very interesting building it is. That was what I was going to go to say. Was, look, Lee and Lucy, thank you very much indeed for your time. I know these things are not straightforward. They're quite time-consuming to put together. But thank you for talking to us about it today. It's a beautiful building, and it's great that the people that work there really enjoy it. And it's clear from Lucy's passion that came across. It must be a lovely place to work. So thank you very much indeed for that. And it's wonderful that we are putting occupants first. And it's great that it looks beautiful, and it also works very well for the people and the canines that go into it. It's wonderful. Thank you to Bryony for hosting. Smooth and seamless again. So thanks to the BCO, and thanks to Tasha Cottle, who actually suggested that we talked about this building. So thank you very much. In closing, the next event we've got is on the 30th of June, and a theme that we've already talked about today that looks at post-COVID ventilation in workplaces and the guidance that the BCO are giving on that. So please look in your emails for that. Following that, we're looking at a physical in-person tour of a building in Cardiff. So it'd be nice to get out about and see a few people again. So more to follow on that. So thank you very much indeed to Lee and to Lucy for everything today. Thank you for attending and listening. I hope it was interesting. Thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.